I woke up from heart surgery to find my husband had transferred our entire life savings to his mistress, but he made one fatal mistake. He forgot that the hospital bill would expose the fortune I'd been hiding from him for years. The morphine. Haze was lifting, and with it came a clarity I wish I could have avoided. My chest ached where they'd cracked it open for the triple bypass, but that pain was nothing compared to what I was about to discover. I'm Martha Richardson, and for 22 years I thought I had a good marriage to Alexander. Funny how a medical emergency can reveal more than just the state of your arteries. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first sign something was wrong came when Alexander wasn't by my bedside when I woke up. The ICU nurse, Chloe, tried to make excuses, said he'd just stepped out, probably getting coffee, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of pity that made my newly repaired heart skip a beat. "Mrs. Richardson," she said softly, adjusting my IV, "there's been some confusion with your insurance paperwork. The billing department needs to speak with you when you're feeling up to it." Confusion with insurance? Alexander handled all our finances. He was meticulous about these things, or so I'd always believed. The second warning sign came when I asked for my phone. Chloe hesitated, then handed it to me with that same look of poorly concealed sympathy. 47 missed calls. Not from Alexander, but from our bank, our investment advisor, and several numbers I didn't recognize. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the notifications. Email after email about account closures, transfer confirmations, and this couldn't be right. Notices about our house being listed for sale. "Chloe," I managed to whisper, my throat still raw from the breathing tube. "When was my surgery?" 3 days ago, honey. You've been in and out of consciousness. 3 days, 72 hours. That's all it had taken for my husband of 2 decades to dismantle our entire life. The door opened, and instead of Alexander, a woman in a crisp business suit entered. "Mrs. Richardson, I'm Abigail Torres from hospital administration. I understand. This isn't the best time, but we need to discuss your billing situation." She pulled up a chair, her tablet displaying figures that made my medicated mind spin. "Your insurance has been canceled, and the payment method on file, a joint account, has been closed. The total for your emergency surgery and ICU stay is currently $287,000. I stared at her, the numbers refusing to make sense. "That's impossible. We have excellent insurance. Alexander's company?" "According to our records, Mr. Richardson terminated your coverage 2 days before your heart attack." Abigail's voice was professionally gentle, but her words hit like physical blows. "He listed the reason as divorce proceedings." Divorce? The word echoed in my head like a bad joke. Just last week, we'd been planning our anniversary trip to Greece. Alexander had been so attentive when I started having chest pains, had called the ambulance himself, held my hand as they wheeled me into surgery. "There must be some mistake," I insisted. But even as I said it, pieces were clicking into place. His recent late nights at the office, the new passwords on his devices, the way he'd been pushing me to sign papers without reading them, claiming they were just routine financial adjustments. Abigail shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Richardson, I need to inform you that without insurance or an alternative payment method, we'll need to make arrangements for the outstanding balance. However," she paused, studying her tablet with a frown. "This is odd. Your personal financial disclosure form shows significant assets that weren't originally reported." "What personal financial disclosure?" "The one submitted this morning by your new financial advisor, a Ms. Lana Morrison?" Lana Morrison. The name hit me like ice water. Alexander's assistant, 28 years old, Harvard MBA, legs that went on forever. I'd met her at last year's company Christmas party, remembered how Alexander had introduced Her as his invaluable right hand. Apparently, she'd become much more than that. May I see that form? My voice sounded stronger now, fueled by a growing fury that even post-surgical weakness couldn't suppress. Abigail turned the tablet toward me. The numbers on the screen made my breath catch. Not because they were wrong, but because they were absolutely right. Every hidden account, every offshore investment, every piece of the financial empire I'd built before I even met Alexander was listed in meticulous detail. This shows assets totaling... Abigail's eyes widened as she scrolled. Mrs. Richardson, according to this, you're worth approximately $14 million? I closed my eyes, letting that number sink in. 14.3 million, to be exact. Money from my grandfather's tech patents, carefully invested and grown over decades. Money I'd never told Alexander about because something, call it intuition, or paranoia, had always held me back. That's correct, I said quietly. But your husband listed your joint assets at only $800,000 when he canceled? Abigail stopped, professionalism warring with human curiosity. I'm sorry, this isn't my place to ask. No, please continue. What exactly did my husband do? She pulled up another screen. 2 days ago, Mr. Richardson transferred all funds from your joint accounts to a new account under his name and Ms. Morrison's. He canceled your insurance, filed papers to quick sell your house, and liquidated your joint investments. The total transferred was approximately $800,000. I almost laughed. Alexander thought he'd cleaned me out, left me destitute and dependent. He'd taken everything he knew about, and that was his critical mistake. In his greed and haste, he'd never bothered to dig deeper into my finances, never questioned why I'd insisted on keeping certain accounts separate, never wondered about the trust fund documents I kept in a safety deposit box he didn't know existed. But Lana, in her eagerness to help him steal from me, had apparently done her homework too well. By submitting this financial disclosure, probably trying to ensure the hospital got paid so there would be no investigation into the insurance cancellation, she'd exposed the very fortune Alexander hadn't known about. The door opened again, and this time it was Alexander. He looked perfect, as always. Tailored suit, silver temples, the practiced smile of a man who thought he'd gotten away with everything. Darling! He rushed to my bedside, reaching for my hand. Thank God you're awake. I've been so worried. I let him take my hand, studying his face. How had I lived with this man for 22 years and never seen the calculation behind those brown eyes? Where have you been, Alexander? I kept my voice weak, playing the part of the confused, vulnerable wife. Oh, dealing with all these medical forms and insurance issues. You know how hospitals are. He squeezed my hand, and I fought the urge to pull away. Don't worry about anything. I'm handling everything. Behind him, Abigail caught my eye. She held up her tablet slightly, reminding me of what we both now knew. I gave her the tiniest nod. Actually, Mr. Richardson, she said smoothly, we've already resolved the billing issue. Your wife's personal assets more than cover the expenses. I watched his face carefully, saw the flicker of confusion, then calculation, then there it was. Fear. Personal assets? He tried to keep his voice casual, but I heard the strain. What personal assets? That's when I knew I had him. My cheating, conniving husband had just walked into a trap of his own making, and he didn't even know it yet. The morphine was wearing off, the pain in my chest growing stronger, but I felt more alive than I had in years. Oh, Alexander, I said, softly, letting a small smile play at my lips. We have so much to discuss. But first, why don't you tell me about Lana Morrison? Alexander's face went through a spectacular range of emotions: confusion, shock, then that carefully crafted innocence I'd seen him use in business negotiations. He was good, I'd give him that. 22 years of marriage, and I was only now seeing the full performance. Lana? My assistant? He laughed, but it came out slightly strangled. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What about her? Did she call about the Shanghai contract? I told her not to bother you while you're recovering. I watched him shift his weight, adjust his tie, his telltale signs of discomfort. How many times had I overlooked these little gestures? Actually, I said, keeping my voice deliberately weak, she submitted some financial documents to the hospital. Very thorough ones. She must be excellent at her job. The monitor beside my bed beeped steadily, marking each beat of my repaired heart. I focused on keeping my breathing even, despite the rage building inside me. The cardiac surgeon had warned about avoiding stress, but no one had mentioned what to do when you discover your husband's betrayal while still in the ICU. Financial documents? Alexander's voice pitched slightly higher. I'm sure that's just a misunderstanding. You know how aggressive these hospital billing departments can be. Abigail, bless her, chose that moment to interject. Mr. Richardson, I'll need you to step out for a moment. The doctor needs to check your wife's vitals. Of course. He leaned down to kiss my forehead, and I forced myself not to flinch. I'll be right outside, darling. Rest now. The moment the door closed behind him, Abigail turned back to me. Mrs. Richardson, I probably shouldn't say this, but I've seen this before. Spouses trying to hide assets during medical emergencies. Are you in danger? I looked at this woman, probably in her 40s, with kind eyes behind her professional glasses. That depends on how you define danger. She pulled out her phone. I have a friend in the police department. Financial Crimes Division. If you need... Not yet. I held up my hand, the IV tugging slightly. I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with first. Abigail nodded, then pulled up more records on her tablet. Well, I can tell you this much. Your husband's signature appears on several documents dated during your surgery. Power of attorney changes, asset transfers, even an attempt to modify your healthcare directives. My chest tightened, and not from the surgery. Healthcare directives? He tried to assign himself as your sole decision-maker if you became incapacitated. Previously, your documents listed your sister as secondary decision-maker after your husband. He attempted to remove her. My sister, Vivian. Of course. Alexander had always resented her presence in our lives, especially her habit of asking uncomfortable questions about our finances. I needed to call her. Can you do me a favor? I asked Abigail. Can you print out all the financial documents that were submitted, including the ones from Ms. Morrison? Already done. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. I had a feeling you might need these. And Mrs. Richardson, my ex-husband was a financial advisor who thought he was clever too. Keep copies of everything. After she left, I spent the next hour going through the documents, my surgical pain forgotten, as I pieced together the full scope of Alexander's betrayal. He hadn't just transferred our joint assets. He'd been systematically preparing for this for months. Bank statements showed regular transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, always, just under the amounts that would trigger federal reporting. Property deeds for our vacation home in Aspen had been transferred solely to his name 6 weeks ago. Our investment portfolio had been quietly restructured, moving assets from stable mutual funds into high-risk ventures that could easily be claimed as losses. But it was Lana's documentation that revealed the true audacity of their plan. Her meticulously prepared financial disclosure, meant to prove I could pay the hospital bill, had inadvertently exposed my grandfather's trust fund, 6.2 million investment accounts in my maiden name, 4.8 million, 3 commercial properties. In Boston, 2.1 million intellectual property rights from my early career in biotech, 1.2 million in annual royalties. Alexander had stolen everything he knew about, thinking our $800,000 in joint assets was all I had. He had no idea about the fortune I'd inherited before we met, or the careful investments I'd made over the years. My roommate, an elderly woman recovering from hip surgery, noticed my intense focus on the papers. "Bad news, dear?" "Quite the opposite," I said, allowing myself a small smile. "I just discovered my husband is not nearly as clever as he thinks he is." The door opened, and my nurse Chloe entered with my afternoon medications. "How's our pain? Level?" "Manageable," I said, though I wasn't talking about the surgical pain anymore. She checked my vitals, then lowered her voice. "Your husband's been making quite a scene at the nurse's station, demanding to know why the billing department has records he wasn't informed about. Dr. Turner had to ask him to keep his voice down." "I'm sure he's just concerned about my welfare," I said dryly. Chloe snorted. "Honey, I've been a cardiac nurse for 15 years. I know the difference between concern and panic. That man out there? He's panicking." After she left, I carefully reached for my phone. I had calls to make, but I had to be strategic. Alexander might be monitoring my communications. First, I texted, "My sister Vivian. Recovering well. Need legal advice when you have time. Nothing urgent." Within seconds, she replied, "Already talked to Mitchell. He's on standby." Mitchell was her husband, a former federal prosecutor who now ran a successful private practice specializing in financial crimes. Next, I called my accountant, but not my regular one. Alexander knew him. Instead, I called Sarah Chen, noting the irony of the avoided surname, who managed only my private accounts. "Martha," she exclaimed, "I've been trying to reach you. There's been some unusual activity." "I know," I interrupted. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me." Very quietly. "Of course. Freeze everything. Every account in my name, every trust, every investment. Use Security Protocol Delta." There was a pause. Protocol Delta was something we'd established years ago, a complete lockdown requiring multiple forms of verification to reverse. I'd never used it before. "Consider it done," Sarah said. "Martha, do you need me to call anyone else?" "Not yet. But prepare the documentation for a full forensic audit. Go back 2 years." After hanging up, I lay back against the pillows, exhausted but grimly satisfied. Alexander and his mistress thought they'd cleaned me out during my moment of vulnerability. They had no idea they'd actually walked into a trap of their own making. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Lana Morrison. I understand there may have been some confusion regarding the financial documents I submitted. Could we perhaps discuss this? I'm sure we can clear up any misunderstandings." I almost laughed. Now she wanted to talk? After helping my husband steal what he thought was everything I owned? I didn't respond. Let her sweat. Let them both sweat. Dr. Turner, my cardiac surgeon, arrived for evening rounds. "Your recovery is remarkable, Mrs. Richardson. Your stress levels seem surprisingly low for someone who just had major surgery." "Oh, doctor," I said with a smile. "I'm just focusing on what really matters, like making sure all my affairs are in order." Outside my room, I could hear Alexander's voice, now speaking urgently into his phone. "No, I need you to check again. There must be some mistake. How could she have—" "Yes, I understand what the documents show, but that's impossible." Dr. Turner raised an eyebrow. "Is everything all right with your husband? He seems agitated." "Just some financial matters," I said calmly. "Nothing I can't handle." As the doctor left, I reflected on the irony of the situation. Alexander had waited until I was at my most vulnerable, unconscious, chest cracked open, fighting for my life, to execute his plan. He'd thought my heart surgery would provide the perfect cover for his theft. Instead, that surgery had saved my life in more ways than one. Because the hospital's need to ensure payment had forced Lana to reveal the very fortune Alexander never knew existed. And now, As I lay here with a repaired heart and a clear vision of my husband's betrayal, I was more dangerous to him than I'd ever been. My phone rang. Alexander's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Martha, darling, there seems to be some confusion about our finances. The hospital has documents I've never seen before. We need to talk as soon as you're feeling better. I love you." I deleted the message and closed my eyes. Oh, we'd talk all right. But not until I was ready. Not until every piece was in place. The cardiac monitor beeped steadily beside me, each pulse a reminder that I was still here, still fighting. Alexander thought he'd won, but he'd made the classic mistake of underestimating his opponent. He'd taken everything he knew about. Unfortunately for him, what he didn't know was about to destroy him. Recovery from open-heart surgery comes with certain benefits nobody mentions in the pre-op consultations. The strongest painkillers, for instance, give you an excuse to appear drowsy and confused when convenient. The constant monitoring means every visitor is logged, every conversation potentially overheard by nurses. And most importantly, everyone expects you to be weak, vulnerable, and dependent. I had no intention of being any of those things. The morning after my revelation, I woke to find Alexander sitting beside my bed, dark circles under his eyes, his usually pristine appearance slightly rumpled. He was scrolling through his phone with increasing agitation. "Good morning," I said softly, playing up the post-surgical weakness. He jumped, nearly dropping his phone. "Martha, how are you feeling?" His smile was strained, his eyes darting between me and the door. Tired, confused. I let my voice waver. The medications make everything foggy. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Good. Let him think the drugs were keeping me docile and unaware. "That's perfectly normal," he assured me, patting my hand. "Don't worry about anything. I'm handling all the details." "Abigail from billing mentioned something about insurance?" I asked, watching his reaction carefully. He waved dismissively. "Just a minor mix-up. You know how these bureaucracies are. It's all sorted now." Liar. But I nodded weakly, letting my eyes drift closed. Through my lashes, I watched him relax further. He believed his own performance. "Actually," I murmured, "could you help me understand something? The nurse mentioned something about power of attorney changes." His hand tightened on mine for just a fraction of a second. "You must have misheard, darling. The medications can cause confusion." "Of course," I sighed. "You're probably right. I had the strangest dream that you were planning to leave me." He actually laughed at that. "Leave you? Martha, you're my wife. I'm here, aren't I? Taking care of everything while you recover." Taking care of everything indeed. I suppressed the urge to confront him right then. Patience. The cardiac monitor betrayed nothing. My heart rate steady thanks to years of yoga and meditation. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "These drugs, they make me paranoid." Completely understandable. He squeezed my hand again. "Why don't you rest? I have a few calls to make." He stepped into the hallway, and I immediately pressed the call button. Chloe appeared within seconds. "Everything okay, Mrs. Richardson? Could you help me to the bathroom?" I asked. "And perhaps, could we take the long way? I need to build my strength." She smiled knowingly. "Of course. Dr. Turner did say you should start moving around," as she helped me into a wheelchair. "Hospital. Protocol, though I could have walked." I whispered, "Can we go past the nurse's station?" "Feeling social already?" she asked with a wink. The cardiac wing's nurse's station was a hub of activity, but more importantly, it was where all visitor logs were kept, where security cameras fed their footage, and where hospital administrators often worked on portable computers. As we passed, I caught sight of Alexander down another hallway, speaking urgently into his phone. His body language screamed desperation. "No, I need more time," I heard him say. "The documents she has, they weren't supposed to exist." Chloe pretended to check something at the station while I absorbed every word I could hear. "Lana, you said you checked everything." "No, we can't transfer anything else right now. It'll look too suspicious. The house closing has to wait." So they were having trouble with their plan. Good. Back in my room, I asked Chloe, "Is there a way to get copies of my medical records? All of them? Including any forms my husband might have signed?" She hesitated. "That's typically handled through medical records department, but given the circumstances," she glanced toward the door where Alexander had disappeared. "Let me see what I can do." An hour later, during shift change when Alexander was getting coffee, she slipped me a thumb drive. "Everything from your admission to now, including visitor logs and signed documents. My cousin works in IT," she explained. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Her face darkened. "My sister went through something similar. By the time she figured out what her husband was doing, it was too late. I recognized the signs." After she left, I carefully hid the drive in my toiletry bag. Alexander might search my belongings, but he'd never think to check inside a tampon box. That afternoon brought another advantage: physical therapy. The therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Grace, arrived to evaluate my mobility. "We'll start slow," she said. "Just basic movements to prevent blood clots." "Actually," I said, glancing at the door to make sure Alexander wasn't nearby, "I'd like to do more. The stronger I appear, the sooner I can go home, right?" She raised an eyebrow. "Most patients want to take it easy." "I'm not most patients." Something in my tone made her study me more carefully. "No," she said slowly. "I don't suppose you are." "All right, let's see what you can do." Over the next hour, I pushed myself harder than she recommended, careful to collapse back into apparent weakness whenever Alexander appeared. Grace caught on quickly. "Quite the actress," she murmured as she helped me back into bed after Alexander's third check-in. "Survival skill," I replied. "I'll note in your chart that you're progressing slowly," she said with a conspiratorial smile. "Need to keep that hospital stay extended for medical observation." Perfect. The longer I stayed here, the more protected I was, and the more time I had to gather evidence. That evening, Alexander returned with flowers. Expensive orchids, my favorite. Or what used to be my favorite before I realized he only gave them to me after he'd done something wrong. "The house agent called," he said casually, arranging the flowers. "Nothing to worry about, just some paperwork that needs both our signatures. When you're feeling better, of course." "Of course," I echoed. "What kind of paperwork?" "Oh, just updating some deed information. Routine stuff. Routine stuff that would no doubt give him sole ownership." I thought of the documents Chloe had given me, including the visitor logs that showed Lana Morrison had been here twice while I was unconscious, both times with a notary. "Alexander," I said suddenly, "do you remember our honeymoon in Santorini?" He looked surprised at the change of subject. "Of course. Why?" "I was just thinking about that little restaurant overlooking the caldera. What was it called?" "Ambrosia," he said automatically, then caught himself. "Why are you thinking about that now?" "The medication," I said vaguely. "It makes my mind wander. Remember how the owner gave us that private cooking lesson?" "Yes." He was watching me carefully now. "And you told me that was when you knew you'd married the right woman. Because I didn't just want to eat the good life, I wanted to learn how to create it myself." His face softened slightly, caught in the memory despite himself. "You wore that white sundress. And you promised we'd go back for our 25th anniversary." I let my voice break slightly. "We still have 3 years to make that happen, don't we?" For a moment, just a moment, I saw a flicker of something like regret in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that calculating look I now recognized. "Of course we do," he said smoothly. Once you're fully recovered, we'll plan everything, lies upon lies. But I had successfully reminded him of who I used to be, the naive, trusting wife, who believed in anniversary trips and growing old together. Let him think the surgery and drugs had made me even more vulnerable to manipulation. The night nurse came in, not Chloe, but an older woman named Helen who radiated grandmother energy. "Time for evening meds," she announced cheerfully. As she prepared the IV, she chatted about her grandchildren, the weather, anything and everything. Alexander excused himself to take another call, and Helen immediately dropped her cheerful facade. "Chloe filled me in," she said quietly. "We've got a network here, honey. Nurses who've seen too much not to recognize the signs. Your room's being monitored. By us, not him. Anyone tries to come in while you're sleeping, we'll know." I blinked. Back sudden tears. "Thank you." "Don't thank us yet. Just focus on getting stronger, really stronger, not just pretending for him." After she left, I lay in the dark, processing everything. Alexander thought he held all the cards. My health, my supposed ignorance, our shared life. He had no idea that my greatest advantage wasn't the fortune he'd discovered too late. It was this. While he was scrambling to cover his tracks, making desperate phone calls and hasty decisions, I was exactly where I needed to be. Protected by hospital security, surrounded by allies he didn't know about, with access to every document he'd signed, every visit he'd logged, every medication request he'd made. He thought my heart surgery had made me weak. In reality, it had given me a fortress, complete with guards he couldn't buy off and surveillance he couldn't disable. Tomorrow, I would begin phase 2, letting him think he was still in control while I quietly dismantled every scheme he'd put in place. But tonight, I would rest, knowing that sometimes the best position in a chess game isn't the one that looks strongest. Sometimes it's the one your opponent doesn't realize is a threat until it's too late. The memories came to me during the quiet hours, when the hospital settled into its nighttime rhythm and the morphine made the boundaries between past and present blur. Like scattered puzzle pieces slowly forming a complete picture, I began to see the signs I'd missed, or chosen to ignore, over the years. It started with small things, didn't it always? 6 months ago, Alexander had suggested we update our estate. Planning. "Just being responsible," he'd said, sliding the documents across our kitchen table. "At our age, we need to think about these things. At our age." I was 52, he was 55. Hardly elderly, but he'd used that phrase more frequently lately, always when discussing financial matters. I remembered the peculiar insistence that we use his lawyer, not our family attorney who'd handled our affairs for 15 years, but someone new. "Fresh perspective," Alexander had explained. "John Tucker comes highly recommended." John Tucker. The name now made my skin crawl. How many documents had I signed in his plush office, trusting my husband's judgment? The cardiac monitor beeped softly beside me as more memories surfaced. Our anniversary dinner 3 months ago at La Maison. Alexander's choice, unusually extravagant even for him. He'd been especially attentive that night, refilling my wine glass repeatedly, steering the conversation toward our golden years. "Have you ever thought about simplifying our lives?" he'd asked. "Maybe selling the Boston properties, consolidating our accounts?" I'd laughed it off. Those properties had been in my family for generations. And do what? Buy a condo in Florida? His smile had tightened just slightly. "I just want to make sure you're taken care of, darling. Taken care of." The phrase echoed in my mind now with sinister undertones. Then there was Lana. When had she first appeared? My mental calendar flipped back 18 months. Alexander had come home excited about a new hire, a brilliant young financial analyst who'd graduated top of her class at Harvard. "She's going to revolutionize how we handle our portfolio management," he'd gushed. I'd met her a month later at a company function. Blonde, polished, with hungry eyes that lingered too long on my husband. I'd dismissed my unease as typical middle-aged insecurity. After all, Alexander had never given me reason to doubt his fidelity, or had he? The late nights had started gradually, first once a week, then twice, then almost every evening. "Big project," he'd explain, loosening his tie as he walked in at midnight. "Lana and I are restructuring the entire Asian market strategy." I noticed he'd started going to the gym again, bought new cologne, upgraded his wardrobe. "Client expectations," he'd said when I commented on his new Armani suits. "Image matters in this business." More pieces clicked into place. The weekend conferences that Lana always attended. The dinner meetings that ran past midnight. The way his phone was suddenly password protected, held at angles where I couldn't see the screen. But the financial manipulation had been even more subtle. 9 months ago, he'd suggested we refinance our mortgage to take advantage of better rates. The paperwork had been dense, technical. I'd signed where he indicated, trusting his financial expertise. Now I wondered, had that refinancing somehow separated my name from the deed? 6 months ago, there was the investment opportunity he'd been so excited about. "Cryptocurrency hedge fund," he'd explained. "High risk, high reward. But I think we should only invest from our joint accounts. Keep your inheritance safe." How thoughtful, I'd believed then. Now I realized he'd been testing boundaries, seeing what he could access without my detailed oversight. The pattern extended further back. 2 years ago, suggesting we add Lana as a signatory on his business accounts for emergency purposes. 18 months ago, moving our joint savings from my trusted bank to his, citing better interest rates. A year ago, the casual suggestion that we create separate wills to avoid estate complications. Each move had been presented logically, wrapped in concern for our future. Each had subtly shifted control of our shared assets toward him, while appearing to protect my separate wealth. Thought about our social circle, how it had gradually changed. Old friends who asked too many questions had been replaced by new couples, his business associates and their younger wives. People who wouldn't notice or care if a middle-aged wife suddenly disappeared from the picture. Even my health issues had been weaponized. When I'd first experienced chest pains 3 months ago, Alexander had been oddly insistent about which cardiologist to see. Dr. Morrison, surely not related to Lana, had prescribed medications that left me constantly fatigued. "You need to rest more," Alexander had said, taking over more household decisions. "Let me handle the stressful things." Had he been setting the stage even then? Creating a narrative of a sick wife, too ill to manage her own affairs? The hospital room door opened quietly, and night nurse Helen peeked in. "Can't sleep, honey?" "Too many thoughts," I admitted. She came in, checking my vitals with practiced efficiency. Sometimes the heart remembers what the mind tries to forget. "What do you mean?" She adjusted my blanket. "Been a nurse 40 years. Seen all kinds of heartbreak. The body keeps score, they say. Your heart attack? Might have been your body's way of saying enough." After she left, I considered her words. The stress I'd been under, the subtle gaslighting, the constant feeling that something was off but being unable to pinpoint what, had it all culminated in my heart literally breaking? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Martha, this is John Tucker. Alexander mentioned you're recovering well. When you're feeling better, we should discuss updating your medical directives. Some forms require your signature." I stared at the message. Even now, while I lay in a hospital bed, they were maneuvering. What kind of medical directives? Something that would give Alexander more control if I became incapacitated again? Another memory surfaced. Last month's dinner party where Alexander had jovially mentioned his concern about my memory. "She's been forgetting things lately," he'd told our guests with a worried smile. "Missed appointments, lost keys. I've suggested she see a specialist." I hadn't forgotten anything, but now I saw the groundwork he'd been laying, establishing a pattern of mental decline that could justify taking control of my assets. The cruelty of it took my breath away. While I'd been planning retirement trips and grandchildren, he'd been orchestrating my financial, and possibly literal, demise. My roommate stirred in the next bed. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Just thinking," I replied. "About that handsome husband of yours." I almost laughed. "You could say that." "Mine left me for his secretary 40 years ago," she said matter-of-factly. "Best thing that ever happened to me. Taught me to trust my gut instead of my heart." "What if you ignored your gut for too long? Then you trust it now," she said simply. "Better late than never." I picked up my phone again, scrolling through old photos. There was our wedding day, Alexander looking young and earnest. Our 10th anniversary in Paris. Last Christmas with my family. In every picture, I searched for signs of deception in his face, finding none. But then I noticed something else. In recent photos, Lana appeared more frequently. Company picnics, charity galas, even in the background of family gatherings. Always positioned near Alexander, always watching. One photo from 6 months ago caught my attention. A retirement party for one of Alexander's partners. I'd been tired that night, left early. But there in the background of a group shot was Alexander and Lana, heads bent together over a phone, her hand on his arm. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. He hadn't come home until 2 a.m. "Working late," he'd said. I zoomed in on the photo. Behind them, barely visible, was a hotel lobby sign. The Fairmont. Another piece clicked into place. The Fairmont was where he'd stayed during his frequent business trips to New York. Trips that, I now realized, coincided with Lana's vacation schedule. The morphine was wearing off, replaced by a clarity that felt like ice in my veins. 22. Years of marriage, and I'd been living with a stranger. Every kind gesture now seemed calculated, every loving word a lie. But amid the pain of betrayal, something else was crystallizing. Determination. Alexander had spent years weaving this web, but in his arrogance, he'd made one crucial error. He'd underestimated me. Just as I'd once trusted him blindly, he now believed I was the same naive woman he'd married. He didn't know about the steel spine I'd inherited from my grandmother, the business acumen that had turned a modest inheritance into millions, or the network of loyal friends he'd never bothered to know. Dawn was breaking outside my window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day. And with it, the end of my blindness. I reached for my phone and composed a text to my sister. "Vivian, remember that rainy day fun grandmother always talked about? I think the storm has arrived." Her response was immediate. "I've been waiting." For this text. "Mitchell's already pulled the files. We'll be there by noon." The past was a map of betrayal, but it was also a blueprint for justice. Every lie Alexander had told, every document he'd falsified, every secret meeting with Lana, they would all come back to haunt him. He thought he'd been building a trap for me. Instead, he'd been documenting his own crimes. By mid-morning, I had transformed my hospital room into a war room. While Alexander stepped out for his urgent business meetings, no doubt crisis management with Lana, I used the medical table to spread out documents, creating a visual map of betrayal. Chloe, my steadfast nurse, kept watch while I worked. "If he comes back early, I'll page you about medication adjustments," she promised, stationing herself where she could see the elevator. The financial statements Abigail had provided told a chilling story. Over the past 18 months, Alexander had systematically moved money through a labyrinth of accounts. What looked like routine transfers were actually a sophisticated shell game designed to slowly drain our joint assets while keeping my separate fortune untouched, until he thought I was dying. Traced my finger across the transactions. March 15th, $50,000 from joint savings to Richardson Investment LLC. April 2nd, $75,000 from our checking to Morrison Financial Services. May 20th, $100,000 from the home equity line to AM Holdings International AM Holdings. Alexander and Amanda? Alexandra? No, Lana. Her full name was Alana. Alexander and Alana. Son of a bitch, I muttered, earning a sympathetic look from my elderly roommate. Finding more bad news, dear? She asked. Finding a pattern, I corrected. My husband and his mistress literally put their initials on their theft. The door opened, and my sister Vivian swept in with her husband Mitchell. Vivian, 2 years older and infinitely wiser, took one look at my makeshift evidence board and raised an eyebrow. Well, she said, I see you've been busy. Should you be out of bed? The nurses think I'm weak and confused, I replied. It's perfect cover. Mitchell, still imposing despite his silver hair, was already examining the documents. His years as a federal prosecutor had honed his ability to spot financial fraud. This is sophisticated, he murmured. Your husband's been careful but not careful enough. See this pattern? He's been using a technique called smurfing, breaking large transfers into smaller amounts to avoid detection. Can we prove it? I asked. Oh, yes. Mitchell's smile was predatory. Especially with these lovely documents from Lana. She's provided a roadmap to every offshore account. Vivian sat on my bed, taking my hand. Tell me about the other players. We need to know everyone involved. I walked them through my discoveries. John Tucker, the lawyer who'd been falsifying documents. Dr. Morrison, the cardiologist who might be over-medicating me. Several executives at Alexander's firm who'd witnessed suspicious documents. Even our accountant, who'd been advising Alexander on tax implications of asset transfers. It's a whole network, Mitchell observed. This isn't just marital betrayal, it's organized financial crime. A commotion in the hallway interrupted us. Through the window, I could see Alexander arguing with someone in a suit. The man was showing him some kind of badge. IRS? I wondered aloud. Mitchell peered out. Close. Financial Crimes Division, FBI. I may have made a call this morning. Mitchell, I hissed. I'm not ready to... Relax. He's not here for you. He's investigating some interesting international wire transfers that happened across state. Lines. Purely coincidental that they involve your husband's business accounts. Alexander's face was red with fury. I could see him gesturing wildly, probably explaining how this was all a misunderstanding. He's panicking, Vivian observed with satisfaction. Good. We watched as Alexander stormed away from the FBI agent, pulling out his phone. Within minutes, my own phone rang. Don't answer, Mitchell advised. Let him stew. Instead, I texted back, resting, medications make me drowsy. Is everything okay? His response was immediate. Just some confusion at the office. Nothing to worry about. I'll handle it. Still trying to keep you in the dark, Vivian muttered. Bastard. Mitchell was photographing documents with his phone. Martha, I need you to think carefully. Do you have any recordings of conversations with Alexander about finances? No, but I remembered something. We have security cameras at home. Alexander installed them last year for safety. They record audio too. Mitchell's eyes lit up. And he doesn't know you know the password? He thinks I'm technologically inept, but I've known it for months. Brilliant. He made some notes. We'll subpoena those recordings. If he's been discussing this at home, another knock at the door. We quickly covered the documents as Abigail Torres entered. Mrs. Richardson, I hope I'm not interrupting? Not at all, I said, noting her professional smile didn't quite hide her excitement. I've been doing some additional research on the financial documents submitted by Ms. Morrison. It's quite fascinating, actually. Some of these offshore accounts show a pattern of deposits that align precisely with dates when large insurance policies were taken out on your life. The room went silent. Insurance policies? I asked carefully. Yes. 5 separate policies, each, for $2 million, taken out over the last 2 years. All with different companies to avoid triggering alerts. Your signature appears on all of them, though the handwriting analysis I had done, informally of course, suggests possible forgery. Mitchell was already taking notes. Who are the beneficiaries? That's where it gets interesting. The primary beneficiary on all policies is Alexander Richardson, but the secondary beneficiary, should anything happen to both of you, is... She checked her tablet. Alana Morrison. I felt a chill despite the warm hospital room. So if I died, Alexander would get $10 million in insurance payouts, plus my estate. And if you both died, his mistress would get everything, Vivian finished. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. This wasn't just about money or infidelity. They had been planning my death for profit. There's more, Abigail continued. I cross-referenced the insurance policy dates with your medical records. Each policy was taken out shortly after you had routine blood work done here at the hospital. They were monitoring my health, I realized. Waiting for the right moment. Or creating it, Mitchell said grimly. Martha, has Alexander had access to your medications at home? I thought about the vitamin supplements he'd been so insistent I take, the special herbal teas he'd bring me each evening, the way I'd been feeling increasingly fatigued over recent months. Oh my God, I whispered. Vivian squeezed my hand. We'll have everything tested, every pill, every supplement. My phone buzzed, with a text from Alexander. Darling, I've arranged for your discharge tomorrow. I've hired a private nurse to care for you at home. Isn't that wonderful? The audacity was stunning. Even now, with the FBI asking questions and his carefully constructed plan crumbling, he was trying to get me out of the hospital's protection. Absolutely not, Mitchell said, reading over my shoulder. Your recovery is having complications. Doctor's orders to remain hospitalized. I quickly typed. Dr. Turner says I need at least another week. Some concerns about my blood work. So sorry, darling. His response was less controlled. Which doctor said this? I'll speak to them myself. Poor Alexander, Vivian said dryly. Not used to things not going his way. Mitchell was on his phone, speaking quietly. When he hung up, he turned to us with a satisfied expression. That was my contact at the FBI. Turns out those wire transfers, they're investigating? Several went to accounts connected to a certain Alana Morrison. She's been using them to purchase property in the Cayman Islands. With my money, I said. Your stolen money, Mitchell corrected, which makes it an international crime. Another buzz on my phone. This time it was from an unknown number. Mrs. Richardson, this is John Tucker. I understand there have been some questions about recent documents. I want to assure you that everything has been handled according to your husband's wishes. I mean, your wishes. Perhaps we could meet to discuss? He's scared, Vivian observed. They're all scared. Good, I said. They should be. Mitchell started packing up the documents. I need to file some motions before the courthouse closes. Martha, don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and definitely don't go home. After they left, I lay back against my pillows, exhausted but grimly satisfied. The conspiracy I'd uncovered was vast, a network of greed that extended from my own bedroom to offshore banks. Alexander had recruited lawyers, doctors, accountants, and his mistress in an elaborate plot to steal my fortune and end my life. But in their arrogance, they'd left a trail of evidence so clear a first-year law, student could follow it, insurance policies, forged signatures, offshore accounts, suspicious money transfers, each crime meticulously documented by the very people committing them. My phone rang again. This time it was Lana Morrison herself. Mrs. Richardson? This is Lana from Alexander's office. I'm calling about those financial documents. Ms. Morrison, I interrupted. my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I know exactly who you are and what you've done. I suggest you contact your lawyer." I hung up before she could respond. Outside my window, dark clouds were gathering. A storm was coming, both literally and metaphorically. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd spent months in a fog of lies and medication, possibly being slowly poisoned by my own husband. Now, with a clear mind and a documented trail of crimes, I was ready for war. My phone buzzed one more time. "Alexander, we need to talk. I'm coming to the hospital. Let him come." Let him walk into this hospital where I was surrounded by witnesses, where security cameras recorded every conversation, where the FBI was already asking questions about his business dealings. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and he didn't even know it yet. I looked down at my repaired heart monitor, watching it beep steadily. They'd tried to break my heart, literally and figuratively. Instead, they'd only made it stronger, and now it was beating with a single purpose: justice. The knock on my door came at 11:47 p.m., soft but deliberate. In the dim glow of hospital monitors, I watched Chloe slip inside, her expression grave. "He's here," she whispered. "In the parking garage. He's been sitting in his car for 20 minutes making phone calls." I pushed myself up, my surgical incision protesting. "Can you—" "Already done." She held up her phone, showing a security feed of the parking garage. "My brother works in hospital security. We've been watching your husband since you asked about those documents." On the grainy footage, Alexander sat in his Mercedes, gesticulating wildly as he spoke into his phone. Even without audio, his panic was evident. "There's more," Chloe continued, pulling up a chair. "I need to tell you something about Dr. Morrison." My blood chilled. "The cardiologist?" "He's not Lana's relative, but they know each other. I've seen them having coffee in the cafeteria 3 times in the last month." The final piece clicked into place. "He's been part of it from the beginning." Chloe nodded. "I've worked cardiac for 15 years. Your symptoms, your medications, something never added up. So I started documenting everything. Every order Dr. Morrison gave, every time your husband visited, every unusual request." She pulled out a small notebook, pages filled with meticulous handwriting, dates, times, medication changes, overheard conversations. "You've been building a case," I realized. "We take an oath to protect our patients," she said simply. "When I couldn't protect you from whatever they were doing before your heart attack, I made sure to protect you after. I studied this woman who'd been quietly saving my life while I slept." "Why didn't you go to the authorities?" "With what? Suspicions? Feelings?" She shook her head. "I needed proof, and I needed you to be awake to confirm what I suspected." "Which was?" "That your heart attack wasn't natural, that someone had been slowly poisoning you." The word hung in the air between us. Poison. It sounded melodramatic, like something from a Victorian novel, but the evidence was mounting. "The supplements," I said. "The vitamins Alexander insisted I take." "I kept one of the bottles," Chloe admitted. "After you were admitted, your husband brought them, saying you needed your regular vitamins. It seemed odd. We have pharmaceutical-grade supplements here, so I kept one." "Where is it now?" "In the hospital lab. My friend in toxicology is running tests off the books. We should have results by morning." My phone buzzed. "Alexander, still in a meeting. We'll come by first thing tomorrow. Sweet dreams, darling." I showed Chloe the message. "He's lying. He's right outside." "Trying to figure out his next move," she agreed. Then she hesitated. "There's something else. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I heard him on the phone yesterday. He was talking about power of attorney, about how if you were declared incompetent, he could control everything legally," I finished. "He mentioned a Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, a psychiatrist who specializes in competency evaluations. Another player in the game. How deep did this go? Chloe, I said, making a decision. I need you to call someone for me, but not from my phone. She handed me her cell without hesitation. I dialed a number I'd memorized years ago but never thought I'd use. Whitaker Security, a crisp voice answered. I need to speak to James Whitaker. Tell him it's Martha Lancaster. My maiden name. Code word, Prometheus. Chloe's eyebrows rose, but she said nothing. Within seconds, a familiar voice came on the line. Martha? It's been what, 10 years? 12, I corrected. Since grandmother's funeral. James, I need your help. James Whitaker ran the most discreet private security firm in Boston. He'd been my grandmother's personal security consultant, helping her protect her assets when my grandfather's business partners had tried to cheat her after his death. I'm listening, he said. I gave him the abbreviated version, the theft, the conspiracy, the possible poisoning. Through it all, Chloe watched with growing amazement. I'll have someone there within the hour, James said when I finished. Martha, why didn't you call sooner? I didn't know I needed to. I trusted my husband. The ones we trust most are the ones who can hurt us worst, he said gently. Sit tight, help is coming. After I hung up, Chloe stared at me. You're full of surprises. My grandmother taught me to always have insurance, I said. James Whitaker was hers. Smart woman. She survived the Depression, built a fortune, and outlived 3 husbands who all tried to take it from her. She used to say, Martha, love with your heart, but protect your assets with your head. Wish you'd listened to her sooner, Chloe said softly. So do I. Chloe's phone chirped. She checked it and smiled grimly. My brother says your husband just left the parking garage. But get this, he didn't go home. He drove to the Fairmont Hotel. Meeting Lana, I guessed. Or hiding assets. The Fairmont has private banking services. Another chirp. Oh, this is interesting. A man in a dark suit just checked into the hospital as a visitor. Says he's here to evaluate a patient for psychiatric transfer. At midnight? I felt a chill. Dr. Brooks? That would be my guess. Chloe stood. I'll alert security that no one sees you without your explicit permission. And I'll make sure the night staff knows you're completely lucid. What if Alexander has paperwork? Legal documents saying he can make medical decisions? Those can be challenged, especially if you have your own evaluation saying you're competent. She pulled out her phone. I'm texting Dr. Sarah Klein. She's our best neuropsychologist and she doesn't trust Dr. Morrison. She'll do an evaluation first thing in the morning. As if on cue, the door opened. Helen, the night nurse, peered in. We've got a situation. There's a man here claiming to be a psychiatrist. Says he has orders to evaluate you. Stall him, Chloe said. I'm calling security. Already done, Helen replied. But he has paperwork, legal-looking documents. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mrs. Richardson? This is Dr. Nathaniel Brooks. I understand there's been some confusion about your mental state. Your husband is concerned. My husband is trying to steal my fortune and have me declared incompetent, I interrupted. I am fully aware and mentally sound. If you attempt to enter my room without my consent, I will consider it assault. Silence. Then, I see. Perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot. Your husband painted a very different picture of your condition. I'm sure he did. Now, unless you have a court order, I suggest you leave. Another pause. This is most irregular. I'll need to consult with Mr. Richardson. You do that, I said, and hung up. Helen was grinning. Nicely done. He's retreating to the lobby, looking very flustered. My door opened again, and this time a tall woman in a black suit entered. Mrs. Richardson, I'm Sarah Conway, Whitaker Security. Mr. Whitaker sent me. She showed her credentials to the 3 of us, then pulled out a tablet. I've already run Preliminary background checks on Dr. Brooks, Dr. Morrison, and John Tucker. Interesting connections. They all attended the same country club, all received large deposits in the last 6 months. Following the money, I murmured. Always do. Now I'm going to station myself outside your room tonight. My colleague is tailing your husband. Another is watching Ms. Morrison's apartment. We'll have full surveillance reports by morning. After she left, Chloe, Helen, and I sat in silence for a moment. You've been building an army, Helen observed. I didn't realize I needed one until today, I admitted. Well, you've got one now, Chloe said. The entire nursing staff is talking. We've all seen cases like this, spouses trying to control their partner's medical care for financial gain. But this is the first time we've seen someone fight back so effectively. My phone buzzed. Vivian. Mitchell got an emergency injunction. Alexander can't make any medical decisions for you without court approval. Also, guess what? Lana Morrison just booked a flight to the Cayman Islands. Leaving tomorrow afternoon. The rats were beginning to flee the sinking ship. She's running, I said. Let her run, Chloe advised. The FBI loves it when people flee. Makes them look guilty. Another buzz. James Whitaker. My people found something interesting. Your husband has a second apartment downtown. Lease is in Lana Morrison's name, but he's been paying the rent. Want to guess what's inside? I called him back. What did you find? Documents. Lots of them. Original copies of your forged signatures, financial records, and a wall safe that my expert is working on as we speak. Is that legal? The apartment manager let us in. Seems Ms. Morrison is 3 months behind on utilities. Makes her in breach of contract. The manager was happy to check on the property. I smiled despite everything. Grandmother would have loved you. She did. That's why she made me promise to look out for you if you ever called. She what? Your grandmother knew about your husband's tendencies. She had me keep a file, just in case. Tears pricked my eyes. Even from beyond the grave, grandmother was protecting me. Thank you, James. Don't thank me yet. This is just beginning. But Martha, you've got good instincts. You surrounded yourself with the right people. At the right time. That's half the battle won already. After hanging up, I looked at Chloe and Helen. I don't know how to thank you both. Just get better, Helen said, and nail that bastard to the wall. Language, Helen, Chloe mock-scolded. Sometimes, Helen retorted, only certain words will do. As they prepared to leave, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies, some I'd chosen, some who'd chosen me. Alexander thought he'd isolated me, made me vulnerable. Instead, his actions had revealed a network of protectors I never knew existed. From nurses to security experts, from my sister to my grandmother's old friends, people were standing with me. The hunter had indeed become the hunted. He just didn't know how many people were now hunting him. The next morning brought a flurry of activity that would have been overwhelming if I hadn't. Spent years managing complex emergencies in my tech company. What Alexander never understood was that before I met him, I'd built and sold a successful software firm. I knew how to orchestrate multiple moving parts under pressure. Dr. Sarah Klein arrived at 7 a.m. sharp with her evaluation kit. Unlike Dr. Morrison's cursory examinations, her assessment was thorough and methodical. Mrs. Richardson, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Some might seem simple, others more complex. This evaluation will be legally binding, so take your time with each answer. For the next hour, she tested everything from my memory recall to my understanding of financial concepts. I recited recent events, explained complex investment strategies, and demonstrated my grasp of legal implications. Your cognitive function is exceptional, she noted, making detailed notes, especially considering your recent surgery. I see no evidence of diminished capacity whatsoever. Would you be willing to testify to that in court? Absolutely. In fact, She pulled out her phone. I'm sending my preliminary report to the hospital's legal department right now, just in case your husband tries anything else today. As she left, James Whittaker's associate Sarah Conway entered with a thick folder. "Cracked the safe in the apartment," she announced. "You're not going to believe what we found." She spread documents across my hospital table. 15 years of planning. Your husband has been keeping detailed records of everything, like he was preparing for a biography of his own crimes. What kind of records? Financial projections showing how long he could maintain his lifestyle after your death. Lists of your assets with notes on how to liquidate them. Even a timeline for what looks like a gradual poisoning scheme. I stared at a document dated 3 years ago. Project Marina. Asset acquisition timeline. My middle name was Marina. He named his plan to kill me after my middle name? Appears so. Look at this. She pointed to another document. He's been testing various combinations of supplements and medications, documenting their interactions with your heart medication. Alexander studied chemistry in college before law school, I remembered out loud. He always joked he could have been a pharmacist. Well, he's been playing amateur toxicologist. These notes show he was specifically looking for combinations that would cause heart problems while appearing natural. My phone rang. It was Mitchell. "Martha, you're not going to believe this. The FBI just raided Alexander's office. They found a second set of books for his investment firm. He's been running a Ponzi scheme." What? That's why he needed your money so badly. He's been using new investor funds to pay off old ones. The whole thing was about to collapse. Your inheritance was going to be his bailout. I put him on speaker so Sarah could hear. "How bad is it?" 9 figures bad. He's defrauded dozens of clients. The FBI agent told me they've been building a case for months, but your situation gave them the probable cause they needed for the raid. After the call, Sarah sat back. This explains the desperation. He wasn't just greedy, he was drowning. A knock at the door interrupted us. Chloe entered with a woman in a power suit. "Mrs. Richardson? I'm FBI Special Agent Catherine Walsh. I understand you have information relevant to our investigation of Alexander Richardson." The next 2 hours were a blur of questions, document reviews, and evidence sharing. Agent Walsh was particularly interested in the timeline of the poisoning. "We'll need to exhume any vitamins or supplements from your home," she said. "With your permission, of course. Take whatever you need." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Martha, this is James Whittaker. You need to see the news. Channel 7. Chloe turned on the TV. The breaking news banner read, "Prominent Boston investment advisor arrested in alleged fraud scheme." There was Alexander, being led out of his office building in handcuffs. He looked haggard, his expensive suit rumpled, his silver temples no longer distinguished but desperate. "Mr. Richardson, do you have any comment about the allegations of attempted murder?" a reporter shouted. Alexander's head snapped up, real fear in his eyes for the first time. The scene cut to a reporter outside the hospital. Sources indicate that Richardson's wife, currently recovering from heart surgery at Mass General, provided crucial evidence that broke open a multi-million-dollar fraud investigation. The shocking twist? Investigators believe Richardson may have been slowly poisoning his wife to gain access to her substantial inheritance. My phone exploded with calls and texts, former colleagues, distant relatives, friends I hadn't heard from. In years, everyone wanted to know if I was okay. Then came a call that made my blood run cold. "Martha? It's Dr. Morrison. What do you want?" My voice was ice. I had no idea. When Alexander asked me to adjust your medications, he said it was because you were anxious about money matters. He said the stress was affecting your heart. I thought I was helping. By prescribing medications that interacted dangerously with each other? He showed me research, studies. I thought, God, I was so stupid. He knew exactly how to play into my ego, made me think I was pioneering a new treatment protocol. Are you recording this conversation, Dr. Morrison? A pause. No. I am. Would you be willing to repeat everything you just said to the FBI? Yes. Yes, I think I need to. After that call, I sat in stunned silence. Another piece of the puzzle. Alexander had manipulated everyone, not just me. Agent Walsh, who had stepped out during the call, returned. Who was that? Dr. Morrison. He wants to confess. She smiled grimly. They always do when the walls start closing in. My sister Vivian arrived with lunch, taking in the chaos of papers and law enforcement, with her usual calm. Well, she said, setting down a bag from my favorite deli. I see you've been busy. The news is calling it the Black Widow in reverse case. Charming. Oh, it gets better. Lana Morrison tried to board her flight to the Cayman Islands. The FBI was waiting at the gate. I couldn't help but smile. Really? With a news crew, apparently. It's all over social media. She was carrying 2 suitcases full of cash and jewelry, including your mother's sapphire necklace. The one that went missing last Christmas? The very same. Alexander reported it as a theft to collect the insurance. Agent Walsh looked up from her notes. Mrs. Richardson, we're going to need you to identify any personal items when we recover them. Of course. The rest of the afternoon was a parade of investigators, lawyers, and hospital administrators. Each brought new revelations. Alexander had taken out a $5 million loan using my forged signature as collateral. Lana had been embezzling from Alexander's company for years. He knew and allowed it as long as she helped with his schemes. There were at least 12 other victims of their financial fraud. The vitamins tested positive for digitalis, a heart medication that's fatal in high doses when combined with my prescribed medications. By evening, I was exhausted but oddly energized. Every revelation, every piece of evidence, was another bar in the cage being built around Alexander and his conspirators. Dr. Turner came by during his evening rounds, shaking his head as he surveyed the chaos in my room. When I said you needed to avoid stress during recovery, this wasn't exactly what I had in mind, he said dryly. Sorry, doctor, but if it helps, my blood pressure has never been better. He checked my vitals and smiled. Actually, you're right. Funny how the truth can be healing, isn't it? That night, as the hospital quieted down, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. My husband had tried to kill me. The man I'd loved, trusted, shared my life with for over 2 decades had methodically planned my death for money, but I'd survived. More than survived. I'd exposed him and saved others from becoming victims. My phone buzzed one more time. Vivian, just saw the late news. They're calling you the woman who wouldn't die. Grandmother would be proud. I looked out my window at the Boston skyline, lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Alexander sat in a jail cell, his carefully constructed world in ruins. Lana was probably negotiating a plea deal. Dr. Morrison was coming clean to save his medical license. And tomorrow, their accomplices would start falling like dominoes. I picked up my phone and texted James Whitaker. Thank you for keeping your promise to grandmother. His response was immediate. She always said you were tougher than you looked. Guess she was right. Get some rest, Martha. The real fight starts tomorrow. I settled back into my hospital bed, my heart monitor beeping steadily. Each beat was a victory, a defiance of those who'd tried to silence it forever. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more evidence, more justice. But tonight, I would sleep peacefully for the first time in months. The hunter had been caught in his own trap, and I was very much alive to see it. The morning brought news that changed everything. Agent Walsh arrived before sunrise. Her usual composure cracked with urgency. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Alexander made bail. I sat up too quickly, my surgical incision protesting. How? The judge set it at $5 million. Someone posted it. Anonymous cashier's check. We're tracing it, but... She hesitated. There's more. Lana Morrison was found dead in her cell last night. The room spun. Dead? How? Apparent suicide. Pills. But the timing is suspicious. She was scheduled to give a full confession this morning. Chloe, who'd just entered with my morning medications, dropped her tray. Oh my God! We've increased your security, Agent Walsh continued. But Martha, we believe Alexander might try to finish what he started. We intercepted a call from the jail. He knows you have enough evidence to destroy him completely. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello, darling. Alexander's voice was different now, the smooth charm replaced by something darker. I hear you've been busy. Alexander. I kept my voice steady while gesturing, frantically to Agent Walsh, who immediately began tracing the call. You know, Martha, I always admired your grandfather's business acumen. Those patents were brilliant. But you were supposed to be the sweet, trusting one. When did you become so calculating? When I realized my husband was trying to kill me, he laughed, a sound that chilled my blood. Kill you? I was trying to free us both. You from a life you never really wanted, me from, well, financial complications. It was supposed to be clean, peaceful. You mean profitable. That too. His voice hardened. But now you've made things messy. Poor Lana couldn't handle the pressure. Such a shame. She had a promising future. The implication was clear. Lana hadn't committed suicide. Alexander, turn yourself in. It's over. Oh, Martha, it's far from over. You have 24 hours to transfer the Marina Trust funds to the account number I'm about to text you. If you don't, well, hospitals have such lax security these days. So many ways for accidents to happen. The line went dead. Agent Walsh lowered her phone. We traced it to a burner phone, but the cell tower puts him somewhere downtown. He's moving around, staying mobile. He killed Lana, I said flatly. We suspect so, but proving it will be difficult. Right now, we need to focus on keeping you safe. My phone chirped with a text, a series of numbers, an offshore account, then another message. 24 hours, darling, or you'll join Lana, and maybe that chatty nurse of yours too. He's threatening Chloe. I showed Agent Walsh the message. We'll assign protection to all hospital staff who've been helping you, she assured me. But Martha, we need to set a trap. Are you willing to play along? The next few hours were a whirlwind of federal agents, hospital security, and technical specialists. They set up monitoring equipment in my room, installed tracking software on my phone, and briefed me on what to say if Alexander called again. James Whitaker arrived with his team, looking grimmer than I'd ever seen him. We found Alexander's bail benefactor, he announced. Shell company traced back to a Russian oligarch. Turns out your husband's been laundering money for some very dangerous people. That's who he owes. The pieces clicked. That's why he's so desperate. It's not just about avoiding jail. He owes money to people who don't accept bankruptcy as an excuse. Exactly. Which makes him even more dangerous. Dr. Turner interrupted our strategy session. I'm sorry, but Mrs. Richardson needs to rest. Her blood pressure is elevated and she's still recovering from major surgery. Doctor, I said, my husband is trying to kill me. Again. Rest isn't really an option. He sighed. At least let me adjust your medications. You need to be strong for whatever's coming. As he prepared an IV, my sister Vivian burst in, followed by Mitchell. We found something, she announced breathlessly. The Marina Trust. It has a failsafe. Grandmother built in a provision. If anyone tries to access it through coercion or threat, it automatically locks down and notifies the trustees. Mitchell nodded. All of whom are federal judges. The moment Alexander's demand hits the system, it'll trigger investigations in 3 states. Grandmother really did think of everything, I marveled. She survived 2 murder attempts herself. Vivian reminded me. She knew how desperate people get when money's involved. Agent Walsh's phone rang. She stepped aside to answer, her face growing darker with each passing second. Alexander's escalating, she reported after hanging up. He's contacted 3 of your major clients, threatening to expose confidential information unless they pressure you to comply. He's also hired someone. We intercepted chatter about a hospital job scheduled for tonight. A hitman? The word felt surreal. Possibly. We're increasing security, but... She hesitated. It might be safer to move you to a secure facility. No. The word came out stronger than I expected. If I run, he wins, and others might get hurt. Chloe, the other nurses, I won't put them in danger. James Whitaker studied me. You have a plan. I do. But it's risky. Let's hear it. I outlined my idea, a trap using the trust transfer as bait. The agents exchanged glances. It could work, Walsh admitted, but the danger is mine to take, I finished. Alexander knows me. He thinks I'll always choose safety, always avoid confrontation. That's what he's counting on. My phone rang. Alexander again. Put it on speaker, Walsh instructed. Have you made your decision, darling? His voice oozed false concern. I need more time. The trust has security protocols. You have until midnight, not a second more. And Martha? Don't test me. Lana did, and look where it got her. After he hung up, the room burst into activity. FBI technicians began setting up more equipment while hospital security coordinated with Boston PD. As afternoon faded to evening, the tension grew. Every footstep in the hallway made us freeze. Every alarm sent hands to weapons. At 8 p.m., Chloe knocked softly and entered. There's a man here claiming to be from hospital maintenance. Says he needs to check the medical gas lines in this room. Agent Walsh stood. Description: tall, dark hair, carrying a toolbox. Has ID, but you've never seen him before. I finished. Exactly. Walsh spoke into her radio. Seconds later, we heard commotion in the hallway. Shouts, running feet, then silence. Subject apprehended, came the report. Had a syringe of potassium chloride, would have caused instant cardiac arrest. My heart monitor betrayed my fear, beeping. Rapidly. So Alexander wasn't waiting until midnight. Change of plans, Walsh announced. We move now. The next hour was choreographed chaos. I was supposedly transferred to ICU for complications, but actually moved to a secure room 3 floors up. A body double took my place in the original room, surrounded by hidden agents. At 11:30 p.m., my phone rang one last time. Time's almost up, Martha. Have you initiated the transfer? I took a deep breath. Yes, but there's a problem. The trust requires biometric verification. You'll need to come to the hospital. Nice try. I'm not that stupid. Alexander, I'm not lying. Grandmother's security protocols, you know how paranoid she was. Either you come here or the transfer fails. Silence. Then, fine. But if this is a trap? It's not a trap. I lied smoothly. I just want this over with. At 11:55 p.m., hospital. Security cameras caught Alexander entering through the emergency room, dressed in scrubs, carrying a doctor's bag. He knew the hospital layout well. We'd attended enough fundraising galas here. I watched on the monitors as he made his way to my original room. Watched as he slipped inside, syringe in hand. Watched as FBI agents materialized from everywhere. Closets, bathroom, even under the bed. Federal agents! Drop the weapon! But Alexander was faster than they expected. He grabbed the decoy nurse, thankfully an undercover agent, and held the syringe to her neck. Let me go, or she dies. Alexander. My voice came through speakers. They'd installed. It's over. Lana's dead. Your Russian friends won't wait. Even if you escape tonight, where will you go? his face contorted with rage. "You bitch! You ruined everything!" "No, Alexander. You did that yourself." The moment of distraction was all the agents needed. A taser dropped him instantly, the syringe falling harmlessly to the floor. As they cuffed him, he screamed threats and profanities, all recorded by hidden cameras. The man I'd loved for 22 years was gone, replaced by this desperate, dangerous stranger. Or maybe he'd always been this person, and I'd simply refused to see it. Agent Walsh's voice crackled over the radio. "Subject in custody. The threat is neutralized." I slumped back against my pillows, exhaustion finally claiming me. It was 12:01 a.m. The deadline had passed, but not as Alexander had planned. In the quiet aftermath, Chloe appeared at my door. "Is it really over?" "Almost," I said. "Just the trial left now." She sat beside my bed. "You know what's funny? Your heart monitor. Through all of this, it's been rock steady, stronger than ever." I smiled weakly. "Guess they did a good job fixing it." "Or maybe," she said gently, "it was never as broken as they wanted you to believe." As the adrenaline faded, I thought about her words. Alexander had tried to break me, physically, emotionally, financially. He'd almost succeeded, almost. But hearts, I was learning, could be remarkably resilient. Even when cracked open, they could heal stronger than before. The cardiac monitor beeped steadily in the darkness, each pulse a quiet declaration. Still here, still fighting, still alive. The next morning, I watched Alexander's interrogation through a live feed in a secure room at the FBI field office. He sat in an orange jumpsuit, his silver temples now disheveled, his calculated charm completely shattered. "Your wife set you up," his court-appointed attorney warned him. "She's smarter than you thought." Alexander's face twisted. She was supposed to be manageable, predictable. "Tell us about Lana Morrison's death," Agent Walsh pressed. "I want immunity." "For murdering your mistress? That's not how this works." His composure cracked further. "She was going to testify against me. She knew everything, the poisoning, the fraud, the Russian connections. I couldn't let her." "So you arranged for her to get those pills in her cell?" I have contacts, guards who needed money." Each word was another nail in his coffin. I watched this man I'd shared my life with confess to murder as casually as discussing the weather. "Mrs. Richardson?" a young FBI analyst interrupted. "We've cracked the encrypted files from Alexander's apartment. You need to see this." The files revealed the true scope of Alexander's plans. He hadn't just wanted my money. He'd been planning to assume my entire identity in the business world. There were forged documents ready to transfer my company shares, fake emails designed to alienate my business partners, even a posthumous confession where I admitted to tax fraud. "He wasn't just trying to kill you," the analyst said. "He was trying to destroy your reputation so thoroughly that no one would investigate your death too closely." I felt sick. When did he start planning this? According to these timestamps, 3 months after your wedding, 22 years of marriage, and he'd been plotting against me for 21 of them. Agent Walsh returned from the interrogation room. "He's turning on everyone now, the Russian oligarchs, corrupt bank officials, other victims we didn't know about. He's hoping for witness protection." Will he get it? Not a chance. Too many crimes, too much evidence. And now that he's admitted to arranging Lana's murder, she shook her head. He's looking at life without parole. That afternoon, I gave my official statement to the FBI, with federal prosecutors present. Every detail of my orchestrated discovery, every piece of evidence I'd gathered from my hospital bed, every moment of fear and calculation. "Mrs. Richardson," the lead prosecutor said when I finished, "your testimony is going to put away not just your husband, but an entire network of financial criminals. The Russian connection alone will help us with 3 other major cases. I'm glad some good can come from this nightmare." My phone buzzed with a text from my banker. The Marina Trust is secure. Attempted access triggered full federal investigation. As designed. Your grandmother's foresight continues to amaze. I smiled sadly. Grandmother had always said, "Money doesn't corrupt people, dear. It just reveals who they already are." Alexander had been revealed indeed. That evening, I was cleared to return to my hospital room. My real one, not the decoy. The FBI had swept it for bugs and confirmed all threats were neutralized. Chloe was waiting with a cup of tea. Heard you took down an international crime ring from your sickbed. Not bad for a heart patient. I had help. I sipped the tea gratefully. Chloe, why, did you believe me so quickly when you first suspected something? She sat down, her expression thoughtful. My mother went through something similar. Not as dramatic, but her second husband slowly convinced her she was losing her mind. Gaslighting, they call it. Changed her medications, hid things, told her she was forgetting conversations. By the time anyone noticed, she'd signed away her house. What happened to her? My sister and I got her away from him, but the damage was done. She never fully trusted herself. Again, Chloe's eyes hardened. When I saw the same patterns with you and your husband, I promised myself, not again, not on my watch. You saved my life. You saved your own life. I just helped you see the truth. That night, as the hospital quieted, I finally allowed myself to think about the future. The divorce would be straightforward now, hard to contest when your spouse is serving life for attempting to murder you. The company was intact, the Marina Trust secure, and my reputation, rather than being destroyed, was now that of a survivor who'd exposed a massive criminal operation. My phone rang. James Whitaker. Thought you'd want to know, he said. We found more of Alexander's victims, 7 other women, all wealthy, all with mysterious health problems after marrying him. None of them died, but he was practicing, I finished. I was going to be his masterpiece. Looks like it. The FBI is contacting them all. You've given them the courage to come forward. After we hung up, I stared out my window at the Boston skyline. Alexander had called me calculating as if it were an insult. But calculation had saved my life. The careful observation from my hospital bed, the strategic alliance with the right people, the patient gathering of evidence, all of it had been calculation in its purest form. He'd mistaken kindness for weakness, trust for naivety. His greatest error wasn't underestimating my intelligence. It was assuming that being calculating was solely his domain. The cardiac monitor beeped steadily beside me. Each beat was a reminder that sometimes the biggest risks aren't the ones that look dangerous, but the ones we take when we trust the wrong people. I picked up my phone and composed an email to my board of directors. Dear colleagues, as you may have seen in the news, I've recently survived both a heart attack and an attempt on my life. I want to assure you that I am recovering well and will return to my position as CEO once cleared by my doctors. Recent events have only strengthened my commitment to our company's mission of innovation with integrity. Sometimes our greatest challenges reveal our greatest strengths. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Best regards, Martha Lancaster Richardson, soon to be just Martha Lancaster again. As I hit send, I realized something. Alexander had been right about one thing. I had become calculating. But he'd failed to understand that calculation, when paired with conscience, is just another word for wisdom. And wisdom, I'd learned, was knowing when to trust and when to verify everything. The night nurse came in for final rounds. Everything. Okay, Mrs. Richardson? Everything's going to be fine, I said. And for the first time in months, I truly believed it. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more evidence, more unraveling of Alexander's web of lies. But tonight, I could rest, knowing that the calculated risk I'd taken, trusting Chloe, calling James Whitaker, cooperating with the FBI, had paid off. Sometimes the most dangerous gamble is not taking one at all. The news cycle exploded within hours of Alexander's arrest. By morning, every major network was running the story of the Boston Black Widow plot. Reporters camped outside the hospital, their satellite trucks lining the street like a modern media circus. "Turn off the TV," my sister Vivian advised, pulling. The curtains closed. "You don't need to see this." But I did need to see it. On screen, Alexander's mugshot stared back at me. The man I'd loved for 2 decades reduced to a criminal ID photo. His eyes, once warm and intelligent, now looked calculating and cold. "Breaking news," the anchor announced. "More victims coming forward in the Richardson poisoning case. Federal investigators now believe Alexander Richardson may have targeted up to 12 wealthy women over the past 15 years. 12. I felt sick. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Business associates, distant relatives, old college friends. Everyone wanted to know if I was okay, if I needed anything, if the stories were true. Then came the call I'd been dreading. "Martha? It's Patricia Morrison, Lana's mother." My throat tightened. "Patricia, I'm so sorry about Lana." "Are you?" Her voice was bitter. "My daughter is dead because of your husband." "I know. And I'm sorry she got caught up in his schemes." "Caught up?" Patricia laughed harshly. "She was sleeping with your husband for 3 years. She helped him try to kill you." "She was also murdered by him," I said quietly. "She was 31 years old. Whatever her crimes, she didn't deserve that." Patricia was silent for a long moment. Then, she asked, "The FBI agent said you have recordings from the hospital. Does she say anything about me?" I closed my eyes, remembering one particular recording where Lana had sobbed to Alexander about disappointing her mother. "She said she loved you." I lied. That she was sorry for the choices she made. Patricia's sob was audible. "Thank you." After she hung up, I sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, thinking about the ripple effects of Alexander's crimes. Lana's parents had lost their daughter. My business partners had nearly lost millions. The other victims had lost their health, their trust, their sense of safety. Agent Walsh arrived with more updates. "The Russian connection is deeper than we thought. Your husband wasn't just laundering money, he was selling them insider information about tech companies, including yours." "What kind of information?" "Patent applications, research developments, acquisition plans. Information that could be worth millions to the right buyers." I thought about our recent R&D projects, the late nights I'd spent reviewing confidential documents at home while Alexander made dinner. Had he been photographing them while I slept? "We'll need to do a complete security audit of your company," Walsh continued. "Also, the prosecutor wants to know if you'd be willing to testify at trial." "Of course. It won't be easy. His defense attorney will try to paint you as vengeful, possibly unstable from your medications. They'll question why you didn't report suspicions earlier." "Because I didn't have suspicions earlier," I said. "That's what makes a good con artist, isn't it? They make you doubt yourself before you doubt them." That afternoon, Dr. Turner cleared me for discharge with strict instructions for follow-up care. As I signed the papers, he said quietly, "You know, in all my years of practice, I've never seen someone maintain such steady vitals during what you've been through. Your heart is remarkably strong." "Maybe it needed to break first," I said. "To get stronger." Getting to the hospital entrance required a security escort. Cameras flashed as I emerged in a wheelchair. Hospital policy, though I could walk fine. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Richardson, how does it feel to know your husband planned your murder? Will you testify against him? Is it true about the Russian mob connection?" I said nothing, letting hospital security clear a path to my sister's car. But as we drove away, I saw something that made my throat tighten. A small group of women holding signs. "We believe Martha." Survivors stand together. Black widows can be men, too. Stop the car, I told Vivian. Martha, no. Please. She pulled over. I got out and walked to the women, photographers trailing. Thank you, I said simply. One woman, maybe 60, stepped forward. My ex-husband tried something similar, smaller scale. Nobody believed me. Until he did it to his next wife. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be sorry. Be strong. For all of us who weren't believed. Back in the car, Vivian drove to her house in Brookline, where I'd be staying during my recovery. The media couldn't access her gated community, offering temporary respite from the circus my life had become. That evening, James Whitaker called with another update. We've identified the source of Alexander's bail money. Dmitry Volkov, Russian oligarch with ties to several American politicians. This is bigger than just attempted murder, Martha. Your husband was part of an international conspiracy. Why tell me this? Isn't it FBI business now? Because Volkov's organization doesn't like loose ends. Alexander failed them. Even in federal custody, he might be in danger. And if they think you know too much, you think they might come after me? I think we need to be cautious. I'm assigning you permanent security. After hanging up, I sat in Vivian's guest room, surrounded by flowers and cards from well-wishers. My old life was over. The marriage, the naive trust, the comfortable ignorance. But I was alive. And now I knew things about international money laundering that made me valuable to federal investigators. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Richardson, this is Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Chen. We need to discuss witness protection options. Please call at your earliest convenience. Witness protection. The words felt surreal. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who'd trusted her husband blindly. This woman had orchestrated his downfall, from a hospital bed, exposed an international crime ring, and survived an assassination attempt. Grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. The Lancaster women don't run from storms, dear. We become them. I picked up the phone to call Sarah Chen. Whatever came next, trials, testimony, possible threats from Russian oligarchs, I would face it. Alexander had tried to break me with poison, betrayal, and isolation. Instead, he'd created his own worst enemy, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The next chapter of my life was beginning, and this time, I was the one writing it. Outside, lightning flashed across the Boston sky, a spring, storm rolling in. I smiled grimly. Grandmother was right about storms. Time to become one. The following weeks revealed the true scope of Alexander's criminal empire. Like pulling a loose thread on a cheap sweater, each investigation led to another unraveling. FBI forensic accountants discovered he'd been running 3 separate fraud schemes simultaneously. The Ponzi scheme was just the beginning. There was also insurance fraud spanning 5 states and an elaborate money laundering operation that funneled cash through 27 shell companies. Your husband was basically running a criminal corporation, Agent Walsh explained during one of our daily briefings. He had employees, departments, even a pension plan for his co-conspirators. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. He gave his criminal associates better benefits than his legitimate employees. The investigation expanded internationally. Interpol got involved when they traced money to banks in Switzerland, Cyprus, and the Cayman Islands. Alexander's business trips to Europe took on new meaning as investigators mapped his meetings with various criminal organizations. From the U.S. Attorney's Office, I watched via secure video feed as authorities raided properties I never knew Alexander owned. A luxury apartment in Manhattan where he'd kept a second office, a beach house in Miami listed under one of Lana's aliases, even a small vineyard in California that was apparently used to launder money through fake wine auctions. Each property is like a time capsule of his crimes, Sarah Chen noted, showing me photos. We found detailed records going back 15 years. Your husband documented everything. Why keep such meticulous records of criminal activity? I asked. Ego, she replied simply. He thought he'd never get caught. These records were his way of admiring his own cleverness. The other victims began reaching out. Nancy Walsh from Seattle, whose mysterious illness had forced her to sell her Amazon stock at rock-bottom prices, to Alexander. Jennifer Liu from San Francisco, who'd survived a near-fatal car accident after discovering her husband's connection to Alexander's network. Rebecca Foster from Miami, who'd spent 3 years in therapy, convinced she was losing her mind while her new financial advisor, recommended by Alexander, slowly drained her inheritance. We formed a support group of sorts, meeting virtually, every Tuesday. 12 women united by one man's greed. The gaslighting was the worst part, Jennifer shared during one session. He made me question every memory, every instinct. They all used the same playbook, Rebecca added. Isolate us from family, make us dependent, then strike when we're most vulnerable. The forensic analysis of my poisoning was perhaps the most chilling revelation. The toxicologist's report showed Alexander had been using a sophisticated cocktail of substances designed to mimic natural heart disease. It's actually brilliant, from a pharmacological standpoint, Dr. Howard Yang explained. He combined digitalis with calcium channel blockers and beta blockers, creating symptoms that perfectly mimicked congestive heart failure. Most doctors would never suspect poisoning. Most doctors didn't have Chloe as their nurse, I pointed out. True. Her documentation was crucial. She noted inconsistencies in your symptoms that didn't match typical cardiac patterns. Meanwhile, Alexander's fellow inmates had learned about his crimes. A guard leaked to the press that he'd been moved to solitary confinement for his own protection, after threats from other prisoners. Apparently even murderers have standards, Vivian noted dryly. They don't like men who prey on their wives. With Alexander in custody and his network crumbling, I shifted from defense to offense. The U.S. Attorney's Office had asked me to help unravel the complex financial web, and I attacked it with the same precision I'd once used to build my tech company. You have a gift for this, Sarah Chen remarked as I mapped connections between shell companies on a whiteboard. Have you considered consulting for the FBI? Let me survive testifying first, I replied, drawing another line between offshore accounts. My recovery became intertwined with the investigation. Physical therapy sessions happened between depositions. Cardiac rehab alternated with strategy, meetings. Each step forward in my health matched a new revelation in the case. The media dubbed me the woman who decoded her own murder, which was both sensational and oddly accurate. Using my tech background, I created algorithms to track Alexander's money movements, identifying patterns human investigators had missed. This transaction here, I pointed to a screen during one session, always happens 3 days before a large withdrawal. It's like a digital smoke signal. The younger FBI analysts were impressed. Ma'am, you've just identified their entire communication system. They were using transaction amounts as coded messages. James Whitaker expanded my security detail as Russian connections emerged. Volkov's organization lost millions when Alexander was arrested. You're not just a witness now. You're the person who cost them a fortune. Wonderful, I muttered. Any other international criminals I should worry about? Actually, he consulted his notes. The Italians are interested too. Seems your husband was freelancing for multiple organizations. I moved into a secure penthouse under an assumed name, courtesy of witness protection. From my new command center, I orchestrated a systematic takedown of everything Alexander had built. My first target was his reputation. Working with a PR firm, I released strategic information to the press, each revelation timed for maximum impact. The story evolved from tragic domestic betrayal to international crime syndicate exposed by brilliant wife. You're playing the media like a violin, Vivian observed, watching the evening news. Alexander taught me that public perception is everything, I replied. I'm just applying his lessons against him. Next came the business connections. I personally called every major client Alexander had cultivated, offering them a choice: cooperate with investigators or be implicated in the scandal. Most chose wisely. The art collection he'd bought with stolen funds. I arranged for it to be auctioned, with proceeds going to victims of financial fraud. The wine cellar he'd curated? Sold to fund a women's shelter. Each sale was publicized. Each donation highlighted. You're not just getting justice, Mitchell noted. You're getting poetic justice. But the masterstroke came when I discovered Alexander's unfinished memoir on his laptop. He'd been writing about his brilliant financial strategies, never imagining it would become evidence against him. I leaked select chapters to financial journalists, letting Alexander's own words condemn him. His ego had documented every crime, every manipulation, every victim. By positioning myself as both victim and victor, I controlled the narrative completely. Alexander had no moves left, no story to tell except the one I allowed. The hunter had been thoroughly hunted, and everyone knew who held the weapons now. The collapse of Alexander's network happened with stunning velocity. Each arrested associate quickly turned state's evidence, and the dominoes fell in perfect sequence. John Tucker, the lawyer who'd forged my signatures, was the first to break. Facing disbarment and decades in prison, he provided investigators with detailed records of every fraudulent document he'd created over the past 5 years. Your husband was meticulous about paper trails, Agent Walsh informed me. He thought they protected him if anyone got caught. Instead, they're hanging them all. Next fell Dr. Morrison. The medical board had already suspended his license, but criminal charges for attempted murder pushed him to full cooperation. His testimony was particularly damaging. He revealed that Alexander had researched poisoning methods for months, even attending medical conferences to learn about drug interactions. I thought he was interested in your treatment, Dr. Morrison admitted during his recorded confession. He asked such detailed questions about cardiac medications. I was flattered by his attention to his wife's care. The FBI used his information to track down the source of the chemicals. They raided a laboratory in New Jersey that had been supplying Alexander with pharmaceutical-grade compounds under the guise of research purposes. The financial network crumbled spectacularly. Each banker, accountant, and investment advisor scrambled to save themselves, providing evidence against their co-conspirators. Within 3 weeks, federal investigators had frozen over $200 million in assets across 15 countries. Your husband's associates are turning on each other faster than we can process them, Sarah Chen marveled during our daily briefing. I've never seen anything like it. The Russian connection proved most dramatic. When Dmitry Volkov realized the FBI had traced his money, he fled to Moscow, but not before his American associates panicked. 3 high-ranking executives at legitimate financial institutions were arrested trying to destroy evidence. From my secure location, I watched the empire crumble through news reports and FBI updates. Each arrest brought more revelations. Each revelation led to more arrests. Alexander's meticulous planning had created a perfect paper trail for prosecutors to follow. The media frenzy intensified. Black Widow's web unravels, headlines screamed. Financial news channels brought in experts to analyze the sophisticated fraud schemes. True crime podcasts dissected each new development. Then came the most satisfying arrest: Alexander's mistress from before Lana, Karen Fitzgerald, a Boston socialite who'd been helping him hide assets for years. She'd thought she was safe, removed from the recent crimes. Mrs. Richardson, Agent Walsh called to inform me, we just arrested Karen Fitzgerald boarding a private jet to Switzerland. She had $3 million in bearer bonds in her luggage. Bearer bonds he bought with my grandfather's money? I guessed. Exactly. She's already asking for a deal. Apparently, she has information about 6 other women Alexander targeted before you. By week's end, 47 people had been arrested in connection with Alexander's crimes. The U.S. Attorney's Office was calling it one of the largest takedowns of a domestic financial crime ring in Boston history. From his solitary cell, Alexander tried one last manipulation, a suicide attempt designed to delay his trial and garner sympathy. But even this backfired when guards discovered his suicide note contained coded messages attempting to coordinate with remaining free associates. "Your husband just can't help himself," Agent Walsh said, showing me the confiscated note. "Even facing life in prison, he's still trying to run cons." The dominoes had fallen exactly as I'd positioned them, each arrest weakening Alexander's remaining defenses. The hunter who had stalked me so carefully had been caught in a web of his own making, pulled down by the very associates he'd corrupted. Justice, I was learning, was sometimes just a matter of applying the right pressure to the right domino. The trial began on a crisp October morning, 6 months after my surgery. I arrived at the federal courthouse in Boston, flanked by U.S. Marshals, my tailored Navy suit a stark contrast to the woman who'd lain vulnerable in a hospital bed. Alexander sat at the defense table, his expensive suit now replaced by a gray prison uniform. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. Then it vanished, replaced by cold calculation. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Sarah Chen presented evidence like a surgeon dissecting a tumor, each document and testimony revealing another layer of criminality. The defendant didn't just attempt to murder his wife, she told the jury. He orchestrated a complex criminal enterprise that spanned 15 years, 12 victims, and millions in fraud. When they played the hospital recordings, several jurors visibly recoiled. Alexander's voice, planning my death while I lay comatose, filled the courtroom with its casual cruelty. "The morphine should keep her under while we handle the paperwork," his recorded voice said. "By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." The defense tried to paint me as vindictive, suggesting I'd orchestrated everything for revenge. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, forged documents, poison analyses, witness testimony from dozens of co-conspirators. On day 3, I took the stand. Alexander watched me intently as I was sworn in, perhaps still believing he could intimidate me into silence. "Mrs. Richardson," Sarah Chen began, "please tell the court about discovering your husband's betrayal." "For 4 hours," I testified. Every detail, every realization, every moment of fear and determination. The jury hung on each word as I described waking from surgery to discover my life dismantled. During cross-examination, Alexander's lawyer tried to shake my composure. "Isn't it true you were heavily medicated during this supposed discovery?" "Yes," I replied calmly, which is precisely why I had the presence of mind to document everything. I knew people might not believe a woman on pain medication over her respected husband, so I gathered proof. And this elaborate theory about poisoning is supported by toxicology reports, 6 medical experts, and your client's own research notes, I interrupted. "Would you like me to explain the interaction between digitalis and calcium channel blockers? I've become quite knowledgeable about cardiac medications recently." The lawyer retreated, and I saw Alexander's jaw clench. He'd always hated when I displayed expertise he didn't expect. The moment I dreaded came during redirect. Sarah Chen asked, "What was the most difficult part of discovering your husband's plot?" I looked directly at Alexander. Realizing that every "I love you" for the past 22 years was a lie. That while I was planning our retirement, he was planning my funeral. That the man I trusted with my life had been slowly taking it. Alexander couldn't maintain eye contact. For the first time since his arrest, he looked genuinely ashamed. After my testimony, the trial moved swiftly. The defense, having no real counter to the mountain of evidence, tried one last desperate move. They put Alexander on the stand. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Under Sarah Chen's cross-examination, his composure cracked. His arrogance emerged as he tried to outsmart the prosecutor, but she led him into contradiction after contradiction. So you maintain you never intended to harm your wife, yet we have recordings of you discussing her accident? Those were taken out of context. What context makes planning someone's death acceptable, Mr. Richardson? By the end, even his own lawyer looked defeated. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. As the foreman stood to read the verdict, I gripped Vivian's hand. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the charge of wire fraud, guilty. 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 37 charges, 37 convictions. Alexander swayed slightly as the final verdict was read. The man who'd orchestrated elaborate crimes for decades had been brought down by the woman he'd underestimated most. As bailiffs led him away, he turned to look at me one last time. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Later, a court reporter told me what he'd said. "You were always smarter than I thought." "Yes, Alexander, I was. And that was your fatal mistake." The sentencing hearing took place 2 weeks later. Alexander faced the judge stripped of his remaining dignity, having aged a decade in months of confinement. Judge Margaret Harrison, known for her strict sentencing in financial crimes, reviewed the case documents with deliberate care. "Mr. Richardson, you didn't just attempt to murder your wife. You methodically poisoned her for months, manipulated her trust, and orchestrated a criminal enterprise that destroyed multiple lives." She looked up from her papers. "In my 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such calculated cruelty combined with such breathtaking greed." The victims' impact statements had been devastating. Each woman Alexander had targeted spoke of lost years, damaged health, shattered trust. Some required ongoing medical treatment from his poisoning attempts. Alexander Richardson, Judge Harrison, pronounced, "I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on the attempted murder charge. Additionally, you will serve consecutive sentences totaling 127 years for fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering." Alexander's shoulders sagged. His lawyer had warned him to expect severity, but the reality of dying in prison finally seemed to hit him. Furthermore, the judge continued, "You are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, including medical costs, therapy expenses, and punitive damages totaling $47 million. After the hearing, federal marshals allowed Alexander one brief moment to address me before taking him away forever. "Martha," he said, his voice hollow, "I suppose you want to know why." "I already know why," I replied. "Greed, arrogance, the belief that everyone else was too stupid to catch you." "I did love you once," he said quietly. "In the beginning." "No, Alexander. You loved what I represented, wealth you could access, trust you could exploit. You never loved me. You loved the idea of getting away with the perfect crime." The marshals led him away, and I knew this would be our last conversation. Alexander. Richardson would die in federal prison, probably shanked by fellow inmates who despised men who hurt their wives. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and questions. This time I stopped to speak. "Justice has been served," I told them. "Not just for me, but for all the women he victimized. Let this be a warning to anyone who thinks they can use marriage as a weapon for financial gain." "Mrs. Richardson," one reporter called out, "what's next for you?" I smiled, thinking of the Victims Foundation I was establishing with the restitution money, the book deal my agent had negotiated, the speaking invitations from women's safety organizations. What's next? I'm going to help ensure this never happens to anyone else. My grandmother used to say that Lancaster women don't just survive, we thrive, and then we lift others up with us. As I walked away from the courthouse, I felt the Boston autumn breeze on my face, free, vindicated, alive. Alexander had tried to write my ending, but I'd written my own instead. And this was just the beginning of a new chapter. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of the Boston Women's Economic Forum, addressing an audience of 500. Financial abuse in marriage is more common than we think, I told them. It starts small, a joint account here, a power of attorney there. Before you know it, you've lost control of your own assets. The Martha Lancaster Foundation had helped 47 women escape financial abuse in its first year. Each case reminded me that Alexander wasn't unique, just unusually ambitious in his crimes. My book, The Heart of Deception, had become an unexpected bestseller. The advance alone covered my legal fees, and the royalties funded scholarships for women entering financial careers. "You've turned tragedy into triumph," Oprah had said during my interview. I'd smiled and replied, "I turned evidence into action." My health had fully recovered, though I still saw Chloe monthly, now as friends, meeting for lunch rather than medical care. She'd been promoted to director of nursing, implementing new protocols for detecting patient abuse. The tech company I'd built thrived in my return. We developed financial monitoring software that banks now use to detect suspicious spousal transactions. Alexander's scheme had inadvertently inspired innovation that protected others. From prison, Alexander had attempted contact twice. Both letters went unread into my lawyer's files. I heard through the legal grapevine that he'd been stabbed by another inmate but survived. Even in prison, he couldn't escape the consequences of his reputation. Standing in my new penthouse office, overlooking Boston Harbor, I sometimes marveled at the journey. The woman who'd trusted blindly had become one who verified everything, but also one who helped others see the warning signs I'd missed. My heart bore no surgical scars anymore, just the invisible ones that made me stronger. Alexander had tried to kill me with 1,000 small betrayals. Instead, he'd created his worst nightmare, a woman who turned pain into power, betrayal into purpose, and survival into success. The Lancaster women didn't just survive storms. We became them. And this storm was changing the landscape of financial justice, one saved woman at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.